Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for our next instalment of our how-to series. Pleased to say that today we're here with Karen, who's going to talk to us how we can get great results from difficult conversations. I'm sure it's something we've all been there at some point and need some help with. So just to let everybody know that this session will be recorded, so you can watch it back later. It's also been streamed for those of people in the Northern Affinity directly onto Workplace, so you can see what's going on there as well. We do have the Q&A and the chat box for people, so if you do want to put questions in there or ask any questions as we go along, please do that, and I'll facilitate that along with Karen. And thankfully you'll be pleased to know that I'll stop talking now and hand you over to Karen to do the main bit. So Karen, if you want to introduce yourself and talk about what we're going to say.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. So morning, everybody. I'm just going to pop this slide up and then good to go. So if you just bear with me one moment, there we go. So so for those that don't already know me, my name's Karen Amos. I'm the owner of BrightBird Coaching and Training. What I do is I specialise in supporting under pressure managers and business owners to get the best out of themselves and their teams. So essentially I work on the people part of the business, and specifically the soft skills, which as we know are often the hardest part of what we do. So I'll quickly go through to what we're going to cover today. There we go. So here's what we're going to look at today. So we're going to have a look at what are difficult conversations, what makes them difficult, the barriers to having good, productive conversations, the power of emotions, and how that really impacts on outcomes of conversations, and our own approach to conflict, and again, how that can impact. What I also want to spend a bit of time looking at is actually how we can take a coaching approach to managing this, because I do believe it's a really powerful way of taking a new approach to difficult conversations that actually brings real benefits to everybody. We'll have a quick look through some examples of types of challenging behaviour that you might encounter, and hopefully at the end give you a few top tips really to take away. What I will say is there's a bit of caveat. We've got 45 minutes today, so on something that I usually spend at least half a day training people on and a day. So this is a real toe dip, but hopefully what you'll get out of today is the ability to have enough tools and resources really to go away and actually be yourself whilst having a successful conversation. So no playing a role, no suits of armour, but actually just be you and get good results. What I'll be doing as I go through, I'll be asking for comments a couple of times, so please chip in, as Michael said, with any Q&As as well, and we'll either answer those as we go through or at the end. Okay, so let's go to the first slide. So I want to talk about barriers to conversations, and there are various barriers really that we can encounter, I think, that get in the way of good, productive conversations. One of them is organisational, and that could be your business, it could be the other person's business, but actually how it's set up, how it's structured. But there are so many factors in there just that are baked in that can be barriers to difficult conversations. One of the main ones, and this is particularly what we're going to look at today, are personal barriers. So what are your own feelings, what are your own behaviours, what are your own expectations around difficult conversations? My culture though, the way I usually interpret that is how we do things around here. So that could be within an organisation and business, it could be within a community and society, but it's how you usually do things, and actually how the other person usually does things and what expectations are there. Another factor could be historical. What's your past experience? What's the other party's past experience? And all that we bring to the table with that baggage. So what I'd like to quickly ask, and that's not an exhaustive list by any means, but what are your own personal barriers to giving feedback and having difficult conversations? what personally makes them difficult for you. So if you can just drop a few things into to chat for us, and Michael, if you can let us know what kind of things we've got in there.
So I guess the first thing would be worry about confrontation.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really common.
Yeah, so about negativity as well, about not wanting to seem negative with people, I guess.
Yeah,
Well.
yeah. And I guess there could be sort of negativity that continues after it as well. That's quite often a fear that people have. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the ones so far.
Okay. What about you, Michael? Can I be so bold as to ask what for you would get in the way?
I guess for me, I would agree with that. It's that confrontation.
Yeah.
I think that it's that having that difficult conversation. You know, so if you're having that conversation with someone, it's getting that negative response that, as I said as well, and you don't want to go down that route, I guess.
Yeah. So it's something you'd rather avoid really than have and sits there for you. So
yeah,
I mean,
we've had another one as well from Helen about fear of breaking down a relationship that you've built as well.
Yeah, and it's a really valid fear, isn't it? I think all of those we have to acknowledge are valid fears. And the reason I asked for the comments really is that I guess in some part we can all empathise with that, and we all share those feelings. The other kind of things that people say to me when I do my training with teams, things like I said, the consequences, the fallout from it, but actually losing control of the situation. Now, sometimes that's the person's worried about losing control of themselves, hopefully not too much, but actually something spiraling out of control. And it's really easy to have that catastrophic thinking that we end up down this route and it's going to end up in this big punch up or a legal battle or whatever. But our brains love playing these tricks on us. And taking us down this fantasy route that's going to end in absolute disaster.
Sorry, Karen, I was just saying we had another couple from Pete as well about fear of the impact of getting it wrong as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, Pete's also mentioned the confrontation thing and needing to be liked by people as well. So it's kind of a very human trait, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for that, Pete, because I think getting it wrong, again, you're going to bring something to the table, but what if there's something you don't know? What if you've got that horribly wrong? Where does that leave you in your relationship? And again, it's a really common fear that people have. And yeah, that actually you're going to upset people. At the end of the day, I do like to believe that the majority are actually quite nice people. We do care about people, we do give a damn, and we should give a damn about our clients, the people that we employ, our associates, we should do. So actually, again, it's quite natural that we wouldn't want to upset somebody. And I think, you know, most of us, again, have a natural intrinsic desire to be liked. So again, like I said, that's the reason I asked this, because I think it's important for us to realise that we're not alone with this. Actually, most people share the same concerns around difficult conversations. So I just want to move on to the next slide, which is about emotions, because actually all those things we've talked about are the reasons that we find conversations difficult really boil down to emotions. It's actually about how we feel about it. So again, really quickly in chat, if you can just fire off, how do you feel personally before, during or after a difficult conversation? Yeah, so what are the feelings that you have? What are the emotions that you experience?
So we've had from Liam anxious, which I guess is nervous as well, is relatively similar. Yeah, we had a Tessa on workplace as well, said very anxious as well. So there's a few probably very similar, that kind of anxiety and nervousness feeling. Yeah, and it's, for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, one thing to think about that sometimes, because our emotions are heightened, actually we can also be quite angry and annoyed at somebody. So whilst we might be nervous, we actually might be quite angry at somebody because they've put us even in the position that we've got to have the conversation.
It seems like Helen's kind of taken the 3 stages of it, really. She's mentioned anxiety to start with, maybe awkward when you're having the conversation, and then relief at the end of it. Which I think is a really good point.
That says, phew, that went well, but sometimes, you know, you can just be relieved that you've got it out of the way, even if it wasn't a great outcome. And I certainly know that feeling historically.
Yeah, and Pete's also said about the fear and nervousness, and basically would rather be doing something else.
Yes. Yeah, and there comes the procrastination, doesn't it? You know, there's nothing easier to kick down the road than a difficult conversation, really. And oh, it's not quite the right time. I'm sure we all know that feeling. So there's lots of emotions in there, aren't there? And like I say, that fear, anxiety, like I say, it could be anger, relief afterwards. We've got any more there, Michael?
Yeah, we just had one from Gemma, impatient. Wants to get it over and done with.
Okay, yeah. And again, if you think about it, that's about the pain that we're in. We're sentient beings. What we actually want to do is stay away from pain. That is what we're hardwired to do. We can't help it. We do it subconsciously. So if you think about it, that as soon as we're in a situation that we're actually using the word difficult conversation, every fibre of our being subconsciously is trying to get us out of there in whatever way we can. So from your point of view, Gemma, is come on, let's just get it over with. You're not going to be avoidant about it, but I just need it out of the way, because then actually I'll stop experiencing the pain. So I think it's really useful to understand what goes on for us. Is there any more, Michael, there?
Yeah, so Pete said that he's got an Olympic gold medal in procrastination.
Right, well, I know a really good coach who might speak to you about that, Pete.
I can recommend someone as well, Pete, just in case.
So thank you for that, everybody. And just before I move on for this, what I'd like to say is, it's really important we acknowledge how we feel. But actually, how does the other person feel? And usually, the other person feels exactly the same as us. They have all those emotions. But because we're so entrenched in getting ourselves out of the painful situation, we forget quite often that the other person might be feeling exactly the same, and they have all those negative emotions going on for themselves as well. So again, I think it's really important, we'll come on to this a little bit more when we look at a coaching approach, that we actually keep that in mind, that the emotions involved aren't just ours, they're actually the other person's as well. Okay, so thanks for your comments, everybody. That was really helpful. So really quickly, I just want to look at this model, which is the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument. And of course, a nice psychological management model would not be anything without a load of completely unintelligible jargon in somewhere in it. But basically, it's a really nice little model. Again, this is a real toe dip to this. I don't want to do a disservice to the model. But it's a tool that's developed to measure an individual's response to conflict situations. So to do this properly, there's a whole questionnaire and profiling tool and everything that goes with it. But as a snapshot, it's still really useful, because what we need to look at, again, because we use the term difficult conversation, we're using the term difficult conversation, which says the conversation is difficult to us. If it wasn't, we'd be just calling it a conversation, chat, but we don't. So it's really important that before we address anything, we actually understand where we're coming from in terms of difficult conversations, as we just looked at with our emotions, but also how we actually approach conflict. So what we've got here, we've got various styles. So if we look first at competing, so competing is highly assertive but uncooperative. And that is, I am not willing to negotiate with another person's opinions and wishes. I'm going to win, my way or the highway. That's what competing means. Collaborating is also assertive, but it's also cooperative. So that means that you're going to consider each of the other party's views. You're going to talk about goals. I'm going to get a mutual understanding. Now, compromising is similar, but it's not quite as assertive. And basically, it doesn't give either party everything they wanted, but gives enough that people go, yeah, that was okay, I can live with that. And to be honest, sometimes that's all you can hope for. That's the best you can hope for. Avoiding, and I'm sure we all know those people, and perhaps this is you in some situations, that actually they will vote with their feet. They're neither assertive or cooperative, and actually they'll either withdraw or refuse to participate at all. And that comes out in various forms, and it's quite easy to see within the team which people are actually avoidant around conflict, particularly managers. And then we've got accommodating, which is cooperative, but it's not assertive, which basically means that you're giving ground. You're going to give leeway, and you're going to acknowledge the other person's side, but actually you're going to give up your ground on it. On that issue. So again, just really quickly, now you might not want to share, and perhaps if we read comments out, Michael, without who said them, which might help to participate. Which are you here? What do you think your predominant style is? And are you different in one situation to another situation? Yeah, so again, if we can just have some quick comments there, I think it'd be interesting to see whether we have any diversity here.
So she said we're okay to read a name out. So Gemma has said that she thinks she's different with different people.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess for myself, probably similar. I think I probably more lean towards collaborating as much as I can, but there will be times when I'm probably the opposite as well, when you want to avoid it. Kind of maybe the polar opposites.
Yeah. You got any more comments there?
Just waiting for the guys coming on Workplace if anybody sends anything in. It takes a few seconds later than that one.
Right, okay.
So nothing else at the moment, but I'll let you know if we do, Karen.
That's fine. So I think, again, this isn't, it's a fairly blunt tool, but I think what's really important is that we start and understand ourselves before we even open our mouth in a conversation, and actually say, where am I coming from here? What's going on for me? Am I really angry at this person? So I'm going to end up in competing, because I'm just going to show them I have the moral high ground. And is that where you're going to go with certain people? Or are you like that with certain people? Because to be honest, you can get away with it.
Absolutely.
I've worked with managers like that. That's quite bullying behaviour, but it happens. So I've got the power and I'm going to use and abuse it. So again, it's just doing that little bit of introspection, really, to say, what's going on for me here? So is there anything else, Michael, before I move on to the next part?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of people say, we've had one saying they'll avoid at all costs.
Okay, yeah, well done for admitting that. Today.
Yeah, another one saying that, so Helen has said, she said she's happy for her name to be read out. It's on Workplace anyway, so everyone could see that. Said she thinks she used to be competing more, but she feels like now she's probably more accommodating.
Okay.
Just how the environment has impacted it rather than her own self.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point, Helen. I think that takes us back to, when we talked about those potential barriers. Could be organisation, could be cultural, within a business, within an organisation, of how we do things around here, or how the structure and the behaviour of other people leads us down a certain road. So yeah, I think that is a really good point there. Thank you for that.
And we've had just one more saying mixture of compromising and collaborating as well.
Okay. Okay, right. Well, thank you for that, everybody. And I think we've more or less covered everything on there between us, haven't we? You know, and I suspect probably for most of us at different times, without taking a very thoughtful approach to it, we probably would cover most of them at some point in certain situations. And again, like I said, we're always going to be challenged with this. All we can do, I'm trying to raise your understanding of yourself in this, really, so that you can be better equipped when you go into conversations. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move on to taking a coaching approach. Now, I'm not talking about doing what I do professionally. I'm not talking about you sitting down with somebody in a closed environment, or for me now online with people, one-to-one confidential environment that's very focused on meeting somebody's goals. That's not what I'm talking about. What we're talking about are having a coaching approach to our conversations and communication. And done well, it's just about good two-way communication. It's about coaching conversations. It's about just understanding and listening to get good outcomes, really. So one of the best ways that I explain what coaching is and isn't is normally in a difficult conversation, and particularly going back to that competing approach or more authoritative approach, is that we would want to tell. It's that finger wagging approach that says, this is how it's going to be. You just go. But actually what we're talking about here, which again goes against our natural instincts in a difficult conversation, is actually moving towards ask. And we'll open that one up a little bit more, but actually asking questions rather than telling people. The other one that's absolutely crucial for good outcomes from difficult conversations is that we work with the person rather than doing to them. And again, particularly when we're annoyed with somebody, or that we just want to get this over with. So back to your impatience, Gemma, is actually want to get this out of the way. I'll just sort this out and then it's done. Is actually what we need to do is work with somebody on it. And that's where we get the best outcomes. One of my favourite people ever, Stephen Covey, love his 7 Habits stuff. Here's one of his sayings: seek first to understand, then to be understood. Because again, we want to get this out of the way. We hold the moral high ground, of course, so we don't listen. And actually what we really need to do is start to understand where the other person's coming from. Then we have a chance they might start to understand us. But if we're holding that difficult conversation, it's in our gift, and I would say our responsibility, to make sure that we manage that part of the process. So do we understand them? Do they feel understood? Because if they don't, there's nowhere to go with this, and we're just going to hit a brick wall. The last part of this I just want to look at around coaching approaches. I do a lot of work on authentic leadership, and it's a really powerful approach. And not just, again, as leaders, managers, I just think in general, as ourselves, as business owners, as leaders moving forward. And the way this fits with difficult conversations is what it actually talks about is actually really having backbone. So the backbone to go and do the difficult stuff in the way it should be done, but actually having the heart and the compassion to remember that we're dealing with other people, and we do that well. And to balance both of those things is the toughest thing really that anybody's ever going to be asked to do. But I think it's something that we could all benefit from stepping up to as a standard really, and a value. So that backbone and heart leads us through to my next slide, which again is about win-win. So if you look at this slide, what we've got on the left is courage, and we've got consideration, so backbone and heart. So if we have low courage and low consideration, everybody loses. So either I'm avoidant about it, so we never get a good outcome, or I don't care about other people, and or I don't care about other people, but everybody loses. I lose, you lose. Now, if we've got high courage, well, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to sort this, but actually I don't care very much about you, you're going to lose. You will not come out of this feeling okay. Alternatively, if I really care so much about you and how you feel, and actually I don't want to upset you, and I will do anything not to upset you, I'm going to lose. You'll feel okay about it, but I will lose. So what we're looking for here with the backbone and heart of this is high courage, high consideration, that actually everybody wins. And what we should be looking as an outcome to any conversation we have is, how can I win and how can you win too? How can we both come out of this going, you know, that was a good result? And as I said to you, that doesn't need to be traditionally everybody comes out leaping through hoops, skipping through flowers, saying the world's perfect, because I have managed, and my clients have managed, people onto capability processors who have been on performance management, who have got a formal warning, but have thanked me and my clients as managers for their support and have felt positive about the way forward. I would say that's a win. Yeah, so we need to look quite broadly at these things, really. So again, I'm just going to move on to the next part, because what's important here, and again, back to a good old Covey phrase, begin with the end in mind, because we are so desperate to get out of this awful situation that we're in, what we do is forget what a good outcome would be, because we think our outcome is get this over and done with. That's usually our outcome going into a difficult conversation, get it over with. But actually what we need to think about really clearly, again, before we even open our mouths, before we even put ourselves in front of the other person, is actually to say, what's a good outcome here? So there's a good coaching question for you, back to a coaching approach, is what would be a good outcome? What would I say was a good outcome? What would they think was a good outcome here? Before we even start, because that will then direct that conversation. It will direct how you approach it. It will give you a much more problem-solving approach to it, and be much more positive. And being clear about what you're bringing to the table. Where are you at with this? What's your position? Both business, organisationally, but actually personally. Has this pushed some real values buttons for you? Because if it has, well, own up to them. You know, be honest with yourself. And I would say actually be honest with the other person. And then, what are you prepared to compromise or negotiate on? Alternatively, what are your lines in the sand here? So again, what won't you compromise on? But if you're not clear on that before you go into the conversation, again, you've nowhere to go with people. And a lot of the reasons that conversations go wrong is we launch ourselves into them when we finally do get round to them and just see what happens. But actually what we're talking about here is planning and taking a more strategic approach to conversations.
Do you think, Karen, then by planning, one of the benefits of that is that you become less emotional? Because like you said, you kind of throw yourself into it, and we all know then kind of the emotional element, whether that's anger or upset or whatever from both parties. But if you are a little bit more strategic and you've prepared a bit more, it's going to be less prevalent than it would be if you just kind of, like I said, just launch into it.
Yeah, absolutely that. And again, you know, we don't have time for it today, but when I do more intensive work on this, I actually have a framework that I use with people that actually works through all these stages, literally before you've even arranged the meeting. A really powerful question to help in these situations is, what do I know here and what don't I know here? You know, because actually you might not know how the other person feels about it. There might be some facts that you don't know. So you're right. It just makes you stop in your tracks. And we talked about all those emotions, and it just levels things out a little bit. You know, how would you like to? What's the person you would like to be in this meeting? So I'm going to move on to just really quickly, just checking we're okay for time. just really quickly to look at 3 types of difficult behaviour that you might encounter. A bit of a light-hearted look, but and again, very much a skimming the surface. But dealing with people who are aggressive, I'm sure at some point we have all encountered somebody who's been aggressive towards us. Easier said than done, but staying level and firm. But back to your point, Michael, if we've already planned this, we have planned to what our pitch and our tone's going to be before we've even started. But actually, most people who are angry do not feel heard, and they don't feel understood. So they need to feel listened to and understood. So you need to demonstrate back to them that you have understood. So a really good way of doing this, again, back to coaching approaches, is to say, so what I'm hearing is da, 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 da. And the impact this had on you was X, Y, Z. Now, if that's a win-win question. If you've got it wrong, they'll tell you and they'll put you straight. If you've got it right, they will say exactly, and now you're both on the same page and you've somewhere to go. So you can't lose with that question. Tell them and really get them to understand that you do want to resolve what's going on. One thing is really important is that you've got to think about personal safety. And I know that can be a little bit extreme, but I've been in situations, particularly as a manager, but I think we can find ourselves in situations where actually we don't feel that safe. And I'm not just talking about physical safety here, I'm talking about psychological safety too. Nobody has to be a punch bag, either physically or psychologically. So it's really important, again, knowing your own line here and remove yourself from that situation. Don't be scared to call a break or reschedule or even cancel. You do not have to sit there and take anything that anybody wants to throw at you. So if somebody's been verbally abusive, that's not okay. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to be abusive and personal towards somebody. But actually what we need to do if we're thinking about a coaching approach, one of the things we don't know is what the other person thinks should happen. So actually we need to explore that and what that person's solution would be. And to be honest, people often don't know. But that's a really good way then to start and settle things down, to say, okay, then shall we look at something together? But if they do have a solution, then again, let them be heard. Be willing to work through that with them, because actually there might be part or all of that solution might actually benefit you both. Don't lose that opportunity. You know, back to complaints from a business point of view. I mean, they're awful, aren't they? We know they are. It's the worst thing that can happen to you in a business, that somebody complains about your service or your product. But the fact is that when we get a complaint, actually it should be a gift, because we really should be learning from that to say, how can we improve what we do moving forward? So I know that's not always easy, but actually take it for the gift it is, really. And again, depersonalizing things. So focus on practicalities. What are the facts? What's actually happened? Because this isn't about people, it's about what's actually happened and what you're going to do moving forward. So there's just a few tips that you can use there. Denial is an interesting one. And again, I'm quite sure, I mean, anybody with teenagers, I'm quite sure, has experienced this at some time. But it does crop up quite regularly. Is it denial? Or is it lack of knowledge? Because again, when we're really annoyed with somebody, we can call it denial, and actually, do you know, they might just not know. It might be lack of experience. So we need to establish that. The way we do that is we focus on facts, research, evidence. So if somebody's in denial, we need to put that in front of them. So again, back to your point, Michael, about the importance of planning, then we really need to do that in this case if we're dealing with somebody who's in denial, because we need to go armed with some facts that we can actually show them. point out the consequences to the person of not resolving. So as you can probably gather, a lot of this stuff I do with managers on how to manage their teams. But actually it applies to clients, it applies to associates equally, I believe, that actually if we can't resolve this, from my point of view, then I can't see that we're going to be able to continue this relationship. You will lose this, I will lose that, whatever the consequences are. But that's really important that we put that on the table and that we don't just keep going around in circles. And again, knowing what our point in, what our line in the sand is. If other people's viewpoints are there, just make sure that we emphasise those are as valid as anybody else's. You may need to disagree, agree to disagree, but those viewpoints are not invalidated just because that person doesn't believe it so. In fact, I've sent a tweet to somebody this morning because a friend of mine used to have this expression all the time: just because someone says it doesn't make it so. And I think that is such a good expression to use and to hold on to.
I think that just about sums up the whole of social media, that, Karen, to be honest.
It probably does, yeah. I think I was casting into the void a little bit there, but I tried to do my bit, you know, small steps and all that. So the other thing is, if somebody's in denial about an issue, is actually ask for their solution again. What we're doing with the coaching approach, it's the ultimate personal responsibility tool. We give it right back. This bit's mine, I'll deal with it. That's yours. You need to deal with that part. So whilst it's a supportive approach, it's a very tough one too, and we do expect people to stand up. So lastly, for these examples, we'll have a quick look at blaming, which is actually often a form of denial. Won't it? We're in. Yeah, and again, anybody with any children of any age, I'm quite sure, experienced this one at some point. We need to understand why they're blaming somebody else, because actually quite often people blame somebody else out of fear of consequences. And if we put their mind at ease on that, we might get more buy-in from them. So can you see again where we talk about the listening being so important and the asking? What we're actually drilling down in here is what is really going on for that other person. But if people are just blaming because it's an avoidant behaviour, then actually we need to come back to facts and evidence, and we use logic in here. The discussion is about them. It is not about somebody else. Because quite often what people will try and do is, for example, pull up an example of when you did something. That can quite often happen as part of this behaviour. And you can come to that and say, well, I'm happy to talk about that afterwards, but right now we're talking about this. But again, you know, be honest with yourself as well. And if they've got a valid point, acknowledge the point. Point out the effects of their behaviour on other people and on themselves, but don't get into a debate. If you are going around in circles, end it. You are then just going to have to go back to the courage part of things, and you're going to have to just make that decision and make that call and be prepared to do that. So again, here's the benefit of planning ahead, because you know where your line in the sand is before you even started. That means you're not thinking on your feet all the way through this conversation. If they're blaming somebody else, again, okay, well, don't argue about it, but what's the solution? So you say that, okay, well, if I accept that as that's your way of seeing the world, that's your reality, that's fine. I don't agree, but let's agree to disagree. But actually, what's your solution here then, with that in mind? Because there may be something in there that you can still use for that win-win. What I would say, particularly with this kind of behaviour, it can be quite toxic behaviour. And particularly if somebody is pushing back on you, can really have a negative emotional, psychological effect on you. Don't underestimate that. So actually, if you are dealing with this kind of person, get support and feedback from a trusted person, whether that's a friend, a colleague, an associate, whoever it is, that you can go and just offload and debrief with them, really. You know, because it really can cause harm. And like I said, this can be actually really quite toxic behaviour. Okay. So I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts or suggestions of other things that they've tried in these kind of situations that might help. That's more or less it for me for the information that I've got to share with you today. I'll just go through a quick few top tips. So as we've said, keep it issue focused. It's based on facts, not opinions. Be direct, there's your courage. Don't go around the houses. Yeah, don't go all around the houses to come back and talk about that. People know what you're doing. And again, it just really gets in the way. And you're just making yourself suffer, to be honest, as well as everybody else. And importantly, avoid need to. You need to. Because actually that's telling, isn't it? And as soon as somebody says that to me, I don't know about you, but even if I don't do it physically, certainly mentally, I cross my arms. What you need to do is, what do you know about it? So straight away, you've hit a wall. So again, instead, using open questions, go into that ask rather than tell. One thing I would say is be sincere, be yourself. If you are annoyed about it, if you are upset about what's going on, if you are very nervous, tell the person. It's a brilliant opener to a difficult conversation. To say, do you know something, I've got to be honest with you, I've been dreading this conversation. But it's really important and I think we need to have it. That immediately puts you on a whole new plane with that other person. What it also means is you can be yourself. You don't have to come in with this suit of armour on, dressed up like Batman, warding off bullets and all the rest of it. Actually, you can just go and be yourself. So if you're not having to play a role while you're doing it, you know, it immediately gets much easier. Avoid mixed messages. The praise sandwich. I know some people still say to do it, but I'm doing some work soon with another business, and in the presentation, one of the co-presenters had a brilliant example of this praise sandwich. Oh, I like your hair. Your face is really ugly, but you've got a nice jumper. Okay. I'll leave that with you as an example. I know it's a bit extreme, a praise sandwich, but I'm really not a fan. It's a mixed message. People just still hear the bad bits or don't know whether it was good or bad. Again, back to courage, really. Just say what needs to be said. We talked about backbone and heart. Strange one at the moment, avoid technology. I would say this is still face-to-face. So live video is still face-to-face. If you can't meet person to person, then it needs to be this. Phone, avoid if you can. Certainly things like texts and emails, you know, should go without saying. But to be honest, again, particularly if you're feeling avoidant about it, it does happen. And as we've talked about, make sure you've got clear actions as an outcome before you even start. So there we go. I don't know if anybody's any questions, any comments.
I have a question actually, Karen. And it's interesting how you brought up the technology thing right at the end there. So as we all know, we've started having a lot of conversations on video in the last 6 months or so, a lot more than we were before, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. And I find that one of the benefits of video is that there's always that we give each other the chance to talk a bit more. There's that instead of when in face-to-face we kind of talk, sometimes you can talk over each other, and whilst that is also nice sometimes interaction, if it's a difficult conversation, that's where the emotions, because you end up speaking louder and louder and talking over each other. I'm wondering if there's a lesson to learn that from video conversations, letting the other person speak, having their bit, then having your turn, and just listening is probably something that we could all take, even when we are doing it face-to-face.
Yeah, that is a really good point, Michael, and to be honest, it's not something that I've thought about too much, because I think we're still in such early days of this. But that approach, actually, back to good old Covey, he has this approach that he calls a talking stick in meetings and conversations, that only the person holding the talking stick can speak and everybody else has to listen. And you're right, it's almost a virtual version of that, really, isn't it? So yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Yeah, thank you.
No, and I think it might make some conversations a little bit easier for people,
Oh,
just
yeah,
by nature.
yeah. I mean, I know I don't know if we've any on the session today, but we have several HR people in the Northern Affinity, and I know that there's been a lot of work and a lot of concern too, rightly so, around holding things like disciplinary meetings and performance management meetings online because they physically haven't been able to do that in person. I'd be interested to see over time what that's actually meant as from a point of view of outcomes, and like you say, how the other person on the receiving end actually feels about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, Peace made the point that he knows a different expression for the praise sandwich. I
Yeah,
actually think
okay,
that
we'll
myself.
leave that one with you. Thanks for sharing, Pete.
So yeah, thank you for that, Karen. I know. Like I said, workplace is a few seconds behind, so sometimes questions come through. But no, I think that's a really useful and really interesting point. I know for a lot of people that we speak to all the time that are maybe at the stage, especially from an employer point of view, maybe looking at that at the moment. Some difficult conversations need to be had. So I guess this is probably more relevant than it's ever been right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, and I think on a whole new level, really, because I think with everything from all the same issues are there from a performance management point of view that have always been, but actually around how we provide our services to clients, whether we're able to, whether we're not, whether there are delays in what we're able to provide or alterations that are needed. Obviously back to things like furlough ending. So with loads of outplacement issues coming up, unfortunately. So again, as employers being able to do that and work through, and I would say that here's an example of a client of mine that she used to go into meetings just absolutely suited and booted because it was a suit of armour, because she would be attacked really by people, but it became a self-perpetuating model really. And actually by developing the courage to go in as herself and say, this is just an awful situation, but we have to do it. I can't avoid it. So let's try and make this as easy as we can for everybody and get as much out of this for you as we can. Completely switch that overnight. And went from being an absolute ordeal to something that, whilst it wasn't great, actually you could still celebrate some successes at the end to say, I had to do that, but I got the right outcome or the best outcome for people. It really can be a game changer.
Absolutely. So we've had a question. Pete's asked a question about do people fear challenging conversations with their clients? Because obviously I know it's probably a lot of it's kind of with employees and employers, but do you think that people do have similar kind of fears and worries when talking to clients?
So it's just, in fact, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna take screen share off a moment. There we go. Yes, I think they do, Pete, and I think, thinking from my own experience here, we are quite fearful of it, aren't we? Because there are huge implications for us as a business for getting that wrong. We might lose work, we might lose future work. We're scared for our business reputation. So I think actually there are huge implications for all businesses in having difficult conversations. So, and I think particularly around things like complaints, really, we sort of swing from let's avoid it altogether to I'm really angry and that's completely unjustified. Where, to be honest, most times we're probably somewhere in the middle. And again, to me, it's just about having some really constructive conversations about this kind of thing. So yeah, so thanks, Pete. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, we had plenty of comments saying great, that Flace and Pete and various other people saying great session, really enjoyed it. I think one general point I'd like to make, obviously, is that we talked about this in the context of conversations, but there's quite a lot we can talk about when in terms of essentially delivering a message. There's don't want to get political in any way, shape, or form, but the message that has been delivered a lot to us as people and as a nation, a lot is. Yeah. There's obviously been issues there, and that kind of reflective in some of the things you've talked about there about being up and being honest, being clear. It's not just a conversation, it's general messaging as well, and this does relate to.
It is, and that's why for me, I mean, I'm going to say it, I'm a coach, it's through me like a stick of rock, but actually it is such a powerful, effective approach to communication in general, you know, moving away from, like I said, that finger wagging, just do it this way, the parental approach to things, to actually really getting buy-in from people. And yeah, that might take slightly longer, but the outcomes themselves are always so much more positive and so much more productive for people. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, first, thank you so much for your time, Karen. It's been really, really useful. And I said, I know there'll be, with these sessions, we get people on watching it on the Zoom, we get people watching it on Workplace, and we get lots of people watch it, whether it's on the YouTube channel or on Workplace, rest of the day and weeks in advance. So if anyone does have anything that comes up from it, if you are watching it on playback and have questions for Karen, I'm sure more than happy to field them at any time.
Please get in touch.
So yeah, thank you again, Karen. So we have another session next week where Fliss is going to do all about the customer journey. So looking forward to that one. So thank you, Karen, again, and thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah, and thanks for your input, everybody. That's really helped the session.